So he will be out a period of time to start the NBA season. Still unclear exactly when.
Dealing with that knee issue lingering from last season.
Yeah.
He did recently open up about his journey to LA. You know, when he left Toronto, he won that championship and decided he wanted to do something different. And the quote he used specifically was, "I wanted to go somewhere where I thought I could build a legacy." And
Kawhi Leonard's injury issues have been a huge topic of discussion on this YouTube channel, but a brand new lawsuit just came out that goes all the way back to 2017 that could be way more sinister in regards to handling Kawhi Leonard's injuries that we possibly thought. And it does do a lot to explain what's going on behind the scenes, because if there's been one consistent problem in Kawhi Leonard's injuries, it's that the timetables never make sense. So before we get to the content, we are less than 1,000 followers away on Instagram from getting to 200,000 followers. So if you guys want some additional content, make sure you check us out there. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. We dominated opening night on PrizePicks, hitting on the Anthony Edwards free square and making an easy $75, and then making another $150 on my Hauser LeBron James picks. We had a lot of NFL success as well, all in all making about $400 over the past week. Now, if you haven't signed up for PrizePicks, make sure you use my promo code microphone to get a free $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. I give away my picks for free on Instagram at TheFlightMike or Snapchat at FlightMikeSnap, and thank you PrizePicks for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Kawhi Leonard's career is one of the most unique careers I think I've ever seen in NBA history, because he's a true story of a player that was developed into a superstar, but wasn't an NBA superstar coming out of the NBA draft. Kawhi Leonard fit a similar mold to other players that developed in the NBA, but were drafted as a relatively raw prospect. Players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, for instance, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Prospects that teams truly understand have limitless potential if they work on a few aspects of their game. And in the case of Kawhi Leonard, coming out of the NBA draft, he had tremendous two-way potential based off of his length and the size of his freaking hands, but his jump shot wasn't necessarily the prettiest. But the San Antonio Spurs saw enough potential in Kawhi Leonard to trade up to the number 15 overall pick in the 2011 NBA draft, which at the time was considered to be a very weak draft. Looking back at it, it was a very strong draft. I mean, if you just look at the top 10 picks of this NBA draft, I mean, number 1 was Kyrie Irving, then Derek Williams, Enes Kanter, Jonas Valanciunas, Jan Vesely, Bismack Biyombo, Brandon Knight. Then you get Kemba Walker, Jimmer Fredette, and then you have a run of players that would eventually become stars. Players like Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, Nikola Vucevic, and then of course, Jimmy Butler at the end of the first round and Isaiah Thomas at the end of the draft. My point being that the Spurs saw so much potential in Kawhi Leonard that they gave up one of their high-end role players in order to trade up for him. It was a move that was very confusing at the time, considering how raw of a player Kawhi Leonard was. And you saw that in Kawhi Leonard's rookie year. In his first season with the Spurs, he didn't average 20 points per game like LeBron James did in his inaugural season with the Cavaliers, or even Victor Wembanyama did in his inaugural season with the San Antonio Spurs. Rather, he averaged 8 points per game. And for the most part, throughout the earlier part of Kawhi Leonard's career, he would just be a high-end role player, a player that provided suffocating defense, but was dependable enough to hit the three. And it was this role that helped the San Antonio Spurs win their first championship with Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi was considered to be the future, and that future looked extremely promising. It's very difficult to overstate how much the Spurs truly invested in Kawhi Leonard. If you take a look at his jump shot coming out of San Diego State University, it looked nothing like his jump shot when he was in his third season with the San Antonio Spurs. A huge reason for this was because the San Antonio Spurs hired a jump shot guru, Chip England, to completely remake Kawhi Leonard's jumper, which is funny because this has been a theme in the NBA lately. We've been seeing a lot of players remake their jumpers, whether it's Lonzo Ball, who successfully did it with the New Orleans Pelicans after having an ugly jump shot with the Lakers that literally boosted his three-point percentage by 10%, or players that do it for absolutely no reason at all whatsoever, like Mikal Bridges did, which we have a separate video video on that. Regardless, the Spurs continue to invest in Kawhi Leonard, hoping that he will one day be the face of the franchise. And the results were mixed. You see, on one hand, in terms of Kawhi Leonard being an actual NBA superstar, the plan worked. During the 2015 to 2016 season, when this team clearly went from being Tim Duncan's team to Kawhi Leonard's team, Kawhi Leonard would break out, averaging 21 points per game. This came off the heels of a remarkable 2015 playoffs, where in 7 games played, Kawhi Leonard still was able to average 20 points per game, clearly giving him the confidence to understand that he is the face of the San Antonio Spurs. During the 2014 to 2015 season, Kawhi Leonard had his breakout year, defensively at least, winning Defensive Player of the Year, but he would break out offensively in the playoffs as well, flashing his potential after scoring a career-high 32 points in Game 3 versus the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round, but eventually the Spurs would lose in 7. However, the future was looking very bright for Kawhi Leonard, and the San Antonio Spurs clearly found the man that was going to carry the torch once Tim Duncan retired. I mean, things were looking incredibly promising for the San Antonio Spurs. Kawhi Leonard agreed to a 5-year contract extension with the team that developed him into a star, and in the very next year, he rewarded him with a breakout performance, averaging 21 points per game, shooting an insane 44% from 3, and averaging nearly 2 steals per game. Kawhi would not only make his first All-Star team in this season, but he would become the runner-up to the MVP award, and he would win his second Defensive Player of the Year award. The Spurs would sweep the Grizzlies behind Kawhi Leonard and go up 2-1 versus the OKC Thunder before losing the next 3 games, losing in the second round. But things were looking up for the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs looked dominant as ever throughout the 2016 to 2017 season behind Kawhi Leonard's insane 25 points per game. This would be enough to power the Spurs to the Western Conference Finals, for Kawhi Leonard would infamously injure himself after landing on Zaza Pachulia's foot and re-aggravate an existing ankle injury. This one play, without a doubt, shaped the course of NBA history, because the very next season, Kawhi Leonard would have a lot of issues with this particular injury, and this completely altered the course of his career. Now, I know what you guys might be thinking. Why on earth is Mike talking about a nearly 7-year-old story involving Kawhi Leonard, especially considering the fact that this happened when he was not even on his last team, but the team prior? This all ties into the crazy lawsuit involving Kawhi Leonard later on in this video, and it reveals a secret about Kawhi Leonard and the Los Angeles Clippers that we could have never expected. But in the meantime, on September 30th, 2017, Kawhi Leonard, who at this point didn't necessarily have a track record of being a player that suffered through a lot of injuries. I mean, yes, in his second season, he only played in 58 games, but aside from that, Kawhi Leonard was capable of playing anywhere from 64 to 74 games for the San Antonio Spurs. His health was never a problem until this very season. On September 30th, 2017, the Spurs announced that Kawhi Leonard would miss the preseason while rehabbing from a right thigh tendinopathy, and they said that there was no timetable for his return. So 2 weeks later, when Greg Popovich was asked about Kawhi Leonard's injury, he once again would say that there's no timetable for his return. A month later, fans were wondering what is going on with Kawhi Leonard. This is, after all, the best player on one of the biggest contenders in the Western Conference, and fans were really eager, because if there was a team that could take down the super team of DeMarcus Cousins, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry and Andre Iguodala, it would be the San Antonio Spurs at full strength. Bear in mind, this team was dominating against the Golden State Warriors when they were in full strength in Game 1 until Kawhi Leonard went down with his injury. So obviously, fans were very eager to see Kawhi Leonard return. On December 11th, 2017, Greg Popovich told reporters that Leonard will be back for a December 12th game against the Mavericks, but he'll be playing on a minutes restriction. Now, this doesn't sound like that big of a deal. Kawhi Leonard would return, play about 16 minutes, would score 13 points on 6 of 12 shooting. He would play in the very next game around 17 minutes, scoring 12 points versus the Rockets. But here's where it gets really interesting. Kawhi Leonard's minutes wouldn't ramp up fully. Over the next month, Kawhi Leonard would sit out some games and play some games, and he would play in 4 of the Spurs' final 8 games before the end of 2017. His minutes would slightly increase throughout that time, going from around 16 in his 3rd game, back up to 20, then 26, then 27. The Spurs would go 2-2 with Leonard in the lineup, but 4-0 in the games that he missed. And for the next month, the Spurs would go 11-5, but they're just 2-4 in the 6 games games that Kawhi Leonard would play. This would continue until January 17th when the San Antonio Spurs announced that Kawhi Leonard will be out indefinitely to continue rehabilitating his right quad. Then a huge report drops about Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs having a huge rift that developed as a result of the way that they handled his injury. Kawhi Leonard's uncle denies the report and says that the team has a good relationship. Now this is where it gets really important. In February, Kawhi spends 3 weeks in New York getting a second opinion on the injury before returning to San Antonio to work with the Spurs. Pop says he'd be surprised if he returns this season, and at the end of the month, Leonard said that he hoped to be back on the court in March. And in March 7th, Kawhi Leonard tells reporters that he wants to finish his career with the Spurs, but at this point, Kawhi is set to be a free agent in 2019, so fans are speculating that Kawhi might leave once his contract is up with the San Antonio Spurs. And this is where it gets even more bizarre. In May, ESPN would release a report discussing the tension between Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs, primarily formed from the way that they handled his injury. Kawhi Leonard's circle, which includes his agent and his uncle, wanted to push Kawhi to get traded to a larger market like Los Angeles, New York, or Philadelphia. San Antonio was interested in signing Kawhi Leonard to a supermax contract extension worth $219 million. A month later, ESPN reported that the Spurs had no interest in trading Leonard and that there's no divide with the team. But eventually, a report came out that Kawhi Leonard grew uncomfortable with the Spurs and wanted to leave San Antonio, and his top destination, the Los Angeles Lakers. Greg Popovich would then do the funniest thing in NBA history by trading Kawhi Leonard to the Toronto Raptors, which is the exact opposite of what he wanted. But Kawhi Leonard's clapback was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. He won a championship with the Toronto Raptors and easily became the greatest Raptor in NBA history. And then he would leave to the Los Angeles Clippers in one of the craziest power moves we've seen in NBA history, saying that he will not join the Clippers unless if they traded for Paul George and ruined their future. So the Clippers made the Thunder an offer that they just simply couldn't refuse, trading Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and 7 first-round picks that are still haunting the Los Angeles Clippers to this day. I mean, in the 2019 to 2020 season, the Clippers were supposed to be the best team in the West. The Lakers and Clippers finished first and second, and then the Clippers would blow a 3-1 series lead against the Nuggets in the second round of the playoffs, depriving us of a Battle of Los Angeles. The very next year, the Clippers would finish 4th in the West. They'd make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals before Kawhi got hurt, and the Clippers would lose 4-2 to the Suns. In the 2021 to 22 season, Kawhi would get injured, and the Clippers would finish 8th in the West. During the 22 to 23 season, both Paul George and Kawhi would get injured, and the Clippers would lose in the first round of the playoffs. And then last season, in Paul George's final season with the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard would get injured, and the Clippers would lose in the first round once again. The craziest part was the Clippers decided to max out Kawhi Leonard and wanted Paul George to take a pay cut. So Paul George left and signed a max with the Philadelphia 76ers. So now you know that Kawhi Leonard is out indefinitely, right? And if you paid attention to the earlier parts of this video, you'd see a lot of consistencies between what happened with him in the Spurs and what's happening with him in the Clippers. I mean, Kawhi Leonard was supposed to be day-to-day back in March when he originally suffered this injury. Some fans were even hoping that he'd return for the playoffs, but he didn't. But then Kawhi Leonard would return and try to make the Olympic team, but he was dismissed by Lawrence Frank. The Clippers were hoping that Kawhi would be at full strength to open up Intuit Dome, which, by the way, is looking fairly successful because Devin Booker said this.
I missed the free throw, man. I was pissed. So I think K missed 2 down there too, so it worked. Hell yeah, you spend $2 billion, put a wall up.
I mean, Kevin Durant also missed a free throw against the Clippers because of the wall, which I thought was really cool. But through it all, it seems like once again, Kawhi Leonard is bumping into problems getting back onto the court. Listen to what his assistant coach Brian Shaw had to say about 10 days ago.
We're out here, he has not been a part of what we've been doing, on a daily basis. So I know the kind of company line has been that he's going to, we're going to be patient with him. So he's doing everything that he can to rehab and strengthen that knee on his own with our medical staff, and we're just dealing with the guys that got available.
Shams Charania even said that he's out indefinitely.
The sources tell me that Kawhi Leonard is expected to be sidelined for the start of this NBA season. He's continuing to rehab inflammation in his right knee. I'm told he is still in that protocol, that process. So he will be out a period of time to start the NBA season. Still unclear exactly when.
And I don't know, the vibe of this season just seems so weird. I mean, Kawhi Leonard himself said that nothing stood out to him during the preseason and during training camp with his relatively new look team.
I mean, just the new guys, just watching them, the new additions we have from, you know, Chris Dunn to Derrick Jones Jr., to some of the young guys that we brought in with Kai Jones last year, and just seeing, you know, how they could develop. So just watching them from day 1 to day 2 to day 3, just seeing their progression. But nobody stood out to me so far.
And the funniest part of all is Kawhi Leonard once again said that it's not a big deal that he's injured. He wants to play for a championship.
This is what I work for. I strive to get a championship, and you know, I'm not out there to try to play 82 games trying to win. Even though that's obligated for me, I try to, but it hasn't worked out, so we'll see.
So a lawsuit was filed by Kawhi Leonard's trainer against the Los Angeles Clippers that could end Kawhi Leonard's career with the Clippers, if I'm being honest. So let's dive into this because it just gets crazier and crazier. So according to Crispy Haynes, who tweeted this lawsuit, Randy Shelton alleges on the basis of personal knowledge and or information and belief that he was wrongfully terminated by the Los Angeles Clippers because Clippers management was subjecting Kawhi Leonard to unsafe and illegal treatment in disregard for Kawhi Leonard's health and safety and known medical restrictions. Therefore, Shelton was himself targeted and subjected to discriminatory and harassing conduct. Despite the Clippers assuring Shelton he would be protected against retaliation, he was not. The Clippers swiftly retaliated against Shelton and terminated Shelton's employment with no stated reason for this decision. So pretty much he's saying that the Clippers forced him to give Kawhi Leonard illegal treatment in order to speed up his recovery that not only didn't work, but caused him to get fired, even though he didn't want to do it, which is so insane. So Randy Shelton was hired by the Clippers and lured away from his position with San Diego State University to accept a role with the Clippers as a strength and conditioning coach. His hiring with the Clippers was a culmination of the Clippers' multi-year campaign to sign Kawhi Leonard in disregard for the NBA's prohibition on tampering. So that's the first thing he's accusing them of. I'm just gonna jump around this lawsuit because it's really dense and bring you guys the highlights, but this goes so far back that it completely blew my mind. So Randy Shelton has maintained a well-publicized relationship with Kawhi Leonard since Leonard was in college at San Diego State University, where Mr. Shelton worked closely with Leonard as the Aztec strength and conditioning coach. Following Leonard's departure from SDSU and his selection to the San Antonio Spurs, Shelton was hired by Leonard to continue to work with Leonard and prepare him for the NBA. Leonard and Shelton maintained a personal and working relationship through 2017 as Leonard ascended to become one of the most dominant two-way players in the NBA. And this is where it gets juicy. Leonard and the Spurs entered a 5-year contract on July 16, 2015. Leonard suffered an ankle injury in Game 1 of the 2017 Western Conference Finals, which would of course change the game of basketball as we know it. Leonard's injury was followed by another injury that precluded him from play begin the following season for the Spurs. Significant media attention surrounded the rift between Leonard and the Spurs organization, as Leonard famously sought a second opinion from private doctors outside of the Spurs medical staff. Sensing some discontent between the superstar Leonard and the Spurs, the Clippers began their efforts to pursue Leonard indirectly through Shelton. So the moment the Clippers found out that Kawhi Leonard was unhappy, potentially, with the way the Spurs were handling his injury, they reached out to his trainer, allegedly. In 2017, assistant general manager Mark Hughes began pursuing Leonard through Shelton. Hughes repeatedly emphasized the need for discretion as Hughes sought private health information about Leonard, and Hughes discussed the Clippers' desire to obtain Leonard and the likelihood of attracting Leonard to join the Clippers. Hughes set up numerous meetings with Shelton beginning in 2017, while Leonard was still under contract, to attempt to find out Leonard's contractual requirements and medical situation. Shelton and Hughes spoke approximately 15 times on the phone and had at least 7 meetings, during which Hughes repeatedly pressed for information regarding Leonard's needs and emphasized the Clippers' desire to sign Leonard before Leonard would enter free agency after bringing a championship to the Raptors. As part of these discussions, Hughes discussed bringing Shelton into the Clippers organization as a strength and conditioning coach, given the personal relationship and trust that Leonard had in Shelton. These promises were made before Leonard publicly stated in 2019 that he would have his own medical team accompanying him. So the Clippers pretty much approach Kawhi Leonard and say,
listen, we got your buddy, personal trainer and strength conditioning coach that you loved in San Diego State University, and we already know what you've been missing in San Antonio. we have a full medical staff accompanying you, and your injury concerns are always gonna come first. You just have to sign on the dotted line.
They got all this information of what Kawhi Leonard was looking for the most in his next team from his personal trainer, who was going to be given a huge promotion for signing with the Clippers. Indeed, despite Frank's 2019 public assurance that the Clippers never had any conversations with Kawhi or with any of his people, Frank himself met personally with Shelton in San Diego around February 2019 to discuss Leonard's willingness to join the Clippers and assuring Leonard through his trainer that the Clippers would provide all necessary provisions for his success at the highest level in free agency and all the vital members who could have had an impact on Leonard's decision. Frank personally assured Shelton that he would have a position within the strength, conditioning, and performance department for the Clippers if Leonard decided to join the Clippers in free agency. So they met a couple of times during Kawhi Leonard's season with the Toronto Raptors to make this happen. The lawsuit mentions multiple times that he was promised a bright future with the Clippers organization, but these promises were never kept, which explains why he's blowing the whistle, and it gets into Kawhi Leonard's current injuries as a result, and this is where it gets so crazy. As is well publicized, Leonard suffered an ACL tear in the 2021 playoffs and was required to undergo surgery in July 2021. For an NBA player, such an injury can be career-ending, but for Leonard, who had suffered numerous injuries previously, the target recovery for such an injury was 730 days. Simply put, this recovery timetable was unacceptable to the Clippers, which I could understand why the Clippers would think this is unacceptable, because typically when you tear an ACL, the recovery timetable is about a year. At least historically, it's always been a year. Now, whether or not it should be longer, I'm not really a trainer, but throughout all of NBA history, typically we see players return after a year. Now, the Clippers demanded productivity from Leonard. Having failed to make the playoffs in 2022, it was decided that Leonard would return to play at the beginning of the season. The Clippers conceded that they would apply principles of load management as advocated for by Shelton, and the Clippers promised that Leonard would be restricted from playing back-to-back games and limit his minutes. However, Leonard was required to play significant minutes to begin the season and complained of swelling and inflammation in his knee after the first two games. On October 24, 2022, an MRI revealed cartilage damage to his knee, and Kawhi Leonard was given biologies to band-aid the problem rather than allowing Leonard the full time required to heal. Less than a month later, Leonard was back in play on November 17, 2022, and he suffered two ruptured ligaments in his right ankle on November 21, 2022. While these injuries for many could be season-ending and should have been a red flag to the Clippers that Leonard should be given the proper time to heal, this again was not an option for the Clippers, and they demanded productivity now. So pretty much the Clippers rushed back Kawhi Leonard, hurting him even more, and once his trainer said that he needed time to heal, the Clippers didn't accept it. So pretty much the trainer is saying the reason why Kawhi Leonard is so consistently injured was because the Clippers lied and said that we would make Kawhi Leonard's medical issues the top priority of this team. But in reality, they were doing what Kawhi Leonard accused the San Antonio Spurs of doing. It goes into mentioning how his trainer reached a psychological breaking point and demanded a leave of absence. Outright publicly exclaimed that he did not feel comfortable in Shelton's presence and that he doesn't want the trainer around. Lawrence Frank concurred and stated that he supports Wright as the lead, effectively silencing Shelton as the Clippers decided to ride Leonard back to success in disregard for the load placed upon Leonard's failing knees and ankle and the psychological harm to Shelton, who helped pave the path for the Clippers to sign Leonard based on assurances that they would have Leonard's best interests at heart. The Clippers did not and do not. They placed revenue and winning above all else, even the health and safety of their franchise player in Leonard. The craziest part about this is that the Clippers wouldn't even win anything. It's truly insane. As Leonard continued to battle through his recovering from an ACL tear, cartilage damage in his knee, and ruptured ligaments in his ankle, the Clippers' record began to falter. Leonard had been averaging approximately 32 minutes a game in December, but the Clippers demanded more from him as they pushed to make the playoffs. By January, they increased the load on Leonard to over 35 minutes a game, and even more so in February to 38 minutes a game, including a 46-minute performance in a loss to the Sacramento Kings. The Clippers' disregard for Leonard's health only intensified from there as the Clippers jockeyed for position amongst a crowded Western Conference. On March 25th, Leonard was hit in the face and showed symptoms of suffering a concussion, but those signs were ignored and Leonard continued to play. Despite league protocol, protocols for potential concussion victims. Then, despite promises to Shelton and the medical staff at the beginning of the season, the Clippers asked Leonard to play back-to-back games in March 2023 and April 2023, averaging 37 minutes a game in April of 2023, despite concerns raised in April of 2023 about Leonard's health being secondary to winning and revenue. The Clippers would obtain the number 5 seed, they'd face the Suns in the first round of the playoffs, and despite contributing 38 and 31 points respectively, Leonard's body was failing him. Though characterized publicly as a sprain, an MRI revealed that Leonard had suffered a torn meniscus and additional cartilage damage on his repaired ACL, which would end Leonard's season and require additional surgery. And this is where it gets even more crazy. The trainer is consistently saying,
"Yo, listen, I'm right. Please listen to me so we could heal Kawhi Leonard."
He wrote a complaint about the work environment and the handling of Kawhi Leonard, noting specifically that the mishandling of Kawhi's injury and return to play protocol has been mind-blowing, and that the disregard for his recovery process is unacceptable, and that it feels as though the ultimate goal is to buy a championship rather than create a positive and supportive environment that prioritizes the well-being of the employees and players. Shelton further complained that his own rights were violated. The following day, Lawrence Frank responded saying, "We take your concerns very seriously and will promptly move forward with an investigation, and that the organization will not tolerate any form of retaliation against any of its employees." And then they would destroy the documents and remove the trainer from any communications. Eventually, the trainer would get fired on July of 2023. Now the trainer gets into recent history. With Shelton gone, the Clippers have continued undeterred in their efforts to use and abuse Kawhi Leonard in disregard for his health and safety for financial gain and notoriety. It is no surprise that the LA Clippers again pushed Leonard to the point of a physical breakdown in the 2023-24 season, necessitating additional surgery, that Leonard was unable to compete in the 2024 Summer Olympics, and that Leonard remains out indefinitely to start this season. This lawsuit is so important. And why is it important? Because many people in the media, myself included, I'm holding myself accountable, was pointing the blame finger at Kawhi Leonard the whole time. Why is Kawhi Leonard's body failing him? He's just load managing and trying to collect a check. How many times have you heard Stephen A. Smith say this?
Kawhi Leonard is the worst superstar in the history of any sport. He is a poster child for what not to be as a star in any sport, period.
And this is something that Stephen A. Smith has been saying consistently. And I understand how on one hand you could look at this and say, wow, he's being so insensitive. At the same time, previously, we just thought that Kawhi Leonard was good to go. And he just like load managing for the hell of it. But we could have never imagined that his knee injury was this severe. It's the same problem that has been going back all the way throughout the 2017 to 18 season with the San Antonio Spurs. But here's my question. If this lawsuit is true, if things are truly not going well with Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers, why isn't he acting in the same way that he did with the San Antonio Spurs? When he thought that the San Antonio Spurs were completely mismanaging his injury, he wanted to be traded to Los Angeles. Now that he's in Los Angeles, I'd make an argument that if these allegations are true, it's even worse than it was in San Antonio. So why would Kawhi Leonard elect to stay with the Los Angeles Clippers and not demand a trade once again? Why would he sign an extension in the middle of January when they're consistently pushing him to play despite being hurt? The only answer that comes to my mind is that Kawhi Leonard from the very beginning wanted one thing more than anything else, and that's to play in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is his home. His entourage wanted him to play in LA to begin with, and you remember where he had this brief period of time in the 2019 offseason where he wanted to be more brand friendly? I mean, do you remember this interview?
And what would you like people to know about you?
I'm a fun guy. Obviously, I love the game of basketball. I mean, it's just more questions you have to ask me in order for me to tell you about myself. I just can't give you a whole spiel. I don't even know where you're sitting at.
I mean, people were roasting this, and this is where all the robot memes came out. But this definitely puts a new twist on the Kawhi Leonard situation, and I really don't know what his future holds for him. At the end of the day, whenever reports like this come out, especially regarding regarding teams like the Los Angeles Clippers, it usually pushes superstars away from ever wanting to play for that franchise. And it's crazy because this is one of the most promising eras in Clippers history, where you had two of the best two-way players in the NBA. And if I had to point the blame finger at anybody, it would be Lawrence Frank. Because even before this report, I thought Lawrence Frank was a horrible general manager. I mean, just based off of the way he constructed this team. You saw what he gave up for Paul George, and I don't really blame him for giving up that haul for Paul George, because it meant you got Kawhi Leonard. Even though I thought that there's no way in hell that Paul George was worth 7 first-round picks. Sam Presti really had leverage in that scenario, and he knew how to dance around a shitty GM like Lawrence Frank. But my issue with Lawrence Frank was how inconsistent he has been as the general manager of the Clippers. I mean, for instance, this is an individual that traded multiple first-round picks for Paul George, then additional picks and capital for James Harden, indicating that he's going all in on this team, signing Kawhi Leonard to a 3-year, $150 million contract despite his injury issues, and then expecting Paul George to take a pay cut, not even being willing to go into the second apron to retain Paul George, which if there's a team that would have made sense to go into the second apron, it would have definitely been the Los Angeles Clippers. But once Paul George wanted to leave, Lawrence Frank just let him leave for nothing. I've shown you this Draymond Green clip so many times.
As you all know, Paul George was going to come to the Warriors, and we wanted Paul George to come to the Warriors. For us to get Paul George, it would have taken a sign and trade, and the Clippers didn't really want to play ball. And, whereas you could have gotten something back for Paul George walking, they get absolutely nothing back. So,
I mean, sure, the Clippers didn't want to give up Jonathan Kuminga for Paul George, but you still would have gotten an unprotected first-round pick in 2027 where Steph Curry would have been 39 years old at that point. Hell, take on Moses Moody, take on something. Don't let him walk away for free. You have no assets as is. And the one thing I'm always looking for in these videos where there's allegations is whether or not these allegations are consistent with other reports we made on this YouTube channel in the past. And if there's one thing that's been consistent throughout my entire career covering the Los Angeles Clippers, it's that Lawrence Frank is a shitty general manager. And I'm sure Clipper fans agree with me on this. So let me know in the comments section down below. This is one of the longest videos we've ever made on this channel. I wanted to make sure we dived into each and every detail before we covered something that was this dense. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comment section down below. Aside from that, Mikal Bridges just changed his jumper for some reason. It makes no sense. He shot 38% from 3 his entire career, and he decided, I'm just going to change my jumper, and it's the worst jumper ever. We're covering that bizarre scenario. I'll leave a link to it in the end screen, and I'll meet you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.